Hey, it's Tuesday night here on Weekend at Gabe's with Weekend at Gabe holding you down here on Twitch, Periscope, Facebook, and YouTube. So you can find us on all the platforms. Thank you for joining us here on this Tuesday night. Also, the final night of Agent Orange administration, so it's a good night. Joining us in about 5 minutes, we're going to be having Corey Richardson. He's a great follow on the social media. Also, someone who's just he does a lot of account planning. He does a lot of stuff, but also he's just smart as hell and just a great follow. So I'm really excited to talk to him about reflect on the last 4 years, as if we haven't reflected enough, but also talk a little bit about what's to come with the Biden administration and things to expect. And maybe we'll have some predictions about what may be ahead of us. But in the meantime, in between time, hopefully everyone had a great new year. This is our first show of 2021. I'm really glad that we're back at it. I've been working on a couple pilot episodes for a podcast I'm doing with Johaz from Dirty Science from the West Coast. We're working on a podcast that's dedicated to West Coast music. So a couple of our guests include DJ Redmatic and Tajay from Souls of Mischief. I'm really excited to get those episodes and those shows up as soon as we can, and so you guys can hear that. And I'm also really excited about just having talking about West Coast music. So I'm really excited that's going to be going down. So keep a lookout for that. It's called Pick Your Brain Podcast, and that should be coming up hopefully later this week. But let's get to some news that I only care about. I watched last night. I stood up till about 1:30 in the morning to watch the FBI MLK documentary film that's out there. They were I can't remember the gentleman's name that directed it, but he was on Fresh Air on NPR this week. And it's a fantastic watch. You can check it out on video on demand or stream it or however you get movies. And it's just a really great insight of how much the feds ain't shit. And if you didn't know, J. Edgar Hoover ain't shit. And how much they just went, how much length the FBI and the feds went to destroy the character of Dr. King. And probably had information that could have saved his life and sat on it potentially, and that in 2027 a lot of the audio that they were tapping him is going to be coming out. So there's a lot more to that story that we don't know yet that should be coming out. So if you haven't, please go watch it. It's FBI/MLK. It's a fantastic watch. I think it was like $8 on DirecTV or wherever you buy it. I highly encourage you first to support it and not just go be a jerk and find it on one of those movie 1, 2, 3 and stream it. Actually support, and so they keep making more of these kind of films. But other than that, man, just enjoyed my 3-day weekend and took a nap Sunday and Saturday. Great football games are on, and now we're back at it. We're moving, and I'm looking forward to the next tomorrow for the inauguration. Obviously, to swear in the new president, but also to see what kind of fuckery is there to see. Because something as terrible is going to happen. So hopefully it's not going to be too awful. But let's rope in our next guest. It's a pleasure to have him. Like I mentioned, he's a fantastic follow on the social medias, on Twitter especially. Corey Richardson joins us. He's an instructor over at the University of Chicago Graham School, VP of Cultural Learning and Insight at Fluent 360, also a contributing writer at verysmartbrothers.com. It's a pleasure to have you. Good evening, Corey. How are you?
I can't complain, man. It's Tuesday night, and I know that tomorrow morning Donald Trump is moving out of the White House. So
there you go.
I have a drink just to to celebrate.
But I hope
I can't hear you, bro.
But soon, hopefully later in the week.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, okay. I can hear you.
All right. Sorry, I had to the internet. It's the internet. But yeah, it's an exciting time for the country for us to turn a page on the last 4 years, which I think we both agree has been a nightmare. But the upside, Corey, maybe you'll agree with me on this. The upside is that we've become more informed about how government works because of the last 4 years, because everyone's been paying a lot more attention to how government works. And that's a good thing, right? That more people are informed. So I think if there's a plus side or a brighter side to all this, maybe that's the brighter side of things.
Well, I think that, yeah, people have involuntarily had to become civically engaged, right?
Yeah.
And stuff that we took for granted for the past 40 years, 50 years, we had to learn, because at each step of this process, from November 3rd to November 7th to December 6th to December 17th to January 6th, all of these dates, which used to be inconsequential times where it was just like, okay, we voted, the AP said that this person's the new president, and now we just go on with life. Every time we turned, it was another crisis that was really just, here's how civics works, right? So every 8th grade civics teacher was sitting there probably going, finally, right? This is my time. because literally it was all the stuff that you filled in the bubbles on the multiple choice test back in 1992, and then you just left it alone. So now we actually have to engage. One, I think you have a higher level of civic engagement. That's one. I think two, people no longer take the process for granted, because we've seen how fragile the system actually is. And make no mistake, there was an attempt to overthrow the government, right? There was an attempt to usurp an election. And the only thing that stopped it was the fact that people took their oaths of office seriously enough to say, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
You know, if the Georgia Secretary of State had been just a little bit more crooked, or if, you know, the Republicans control both houses of Congress, or if the people in Pennsylvania had decided, if a couple of judges in Pennsylvania decided to make a decision the other way, this thing could have all gone to shit. And we're very lucky that the legitimacy of government and the legitimacy of office took primacy over Donald Trump's wins, right? Took primacy over partisan politics. And I don't know if we're at a breaking point, but I do know that we sustained a major hit and we survived. So I think we're good for now.
You know, and a conservative view would probably say, like, see, look, there's checks and balances. There's protections and guardrails in government to prevent someone from doing this. But I would probably argue that everyone was just so fed up with even if there was maybe some validity to anything that they were arguing in court, that no judge or any official wanted to partake in the mere idea of carrying on this idea that there was voter fraud, and everyone just jumped on board and said, we're not doing that. And no one wants to be a footnote in history of, agreeing with the administration. But I kind of feel like this was just one of those moments where people just had enough, and no one was going to ride that train to rally any support for him. I don't know if there was I don't necessarily think that there were guardrails. I just think that judges and officials, even Republicans, were just so tired of and exhausted of it that no one was going to touch it.
Well, I think also, though, you have to remember that in politics, you always have to think about what happens when the shoe is on the other foot.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And people can't always act in self-interest, because they always have to think about what happens when the tide shifts, because the tide will eventually shift. Right. So if you're the Republican majority in the Michigan State House, you have to worry that in 6 years, when you might be the minority, what's going to happen to us? And so it's self-preservation in a way to not want to throw out the entire system, right? It's not just about, well, we don't like Trump. No, it's that if we abandon the republic now, what happens when the power shifts? And the power will eventually shift. It's just the way the pendulum swings.
Sure.
And so, it's kind of interesting how, the people in Georgia who have been heralded as heroes of democracy are actually very much actively trying to undermine voting rights for African Americans in that state. The people who were, who have been these judges who have been heralded as, these
saviors.
Saviors. These guys, these are Trump appointees, right? A lot of these people were the American Bar Association said a lot of people weren't even qualified for the jobs that they had.
Right.
The fact of the matter was, the Trump argument was just so flimsy that nobody could take it seriously, right? And the argument was basically, toss out the votes because I said so. And that just doesn't fly.
Right.
That's not sustainable. And the disturbing thing about the Supreme Court was, Clarence Thomas and Brett Kavanaugh basically were saying, well, if you had evidence, we would have at least looked at it. The rest of the court said this has no standing, but they said, well, we have original jurisdiction, so if you have evidence, we'll at least look. So we have to think about, this was one of those, in air traffic control, is called a near miss, right? Where two planes get really close to each other, almost hitting. This was one of those. We almost had a mid-air collision. We didn't. And again, we've survived a real crisis in democracy. We've survived a real crisis in legitimacy of government. Yeah. And now we're about to get onto the other side of it tomorrow. And there are going to be a lot of questions that are going to just come up over the next few months, next few years, that we need to be prepared to answer. There's going to be violence. We need to be able to figure out what we do about right-wing white supremacist violence. Yeah. There's going to be, backlash against different communities of different identities. And what do we do about that? There's going to be all kinds of stuff that's going to come up that we're going to need to be able to be prepared to answer, but at least we don't have the existential threat of Trumpism still in the air. That's the good thing.
I think that my concern was, this was maybe 6 months ago. I was like, well, if he loses, he's still going to be a troll. Like, he's just going to be there lurking. But now that his social media and his biggest megaphone is taken from him, now I kind of feel a little bit more relieved that his reach isn't as far as it could be, unless people fucking find him on a newsletter or some sort of video service that he's a direct streaming service. I don't know, but I feel a little bit more comforted that is not something that Biden is going to have to address every day. It's like, oh, Trump tweeted this about you today, and that's kind of like removed. So in a sense, I'm a little bit more comforted with that idea that we don't have to deal with that sort of that lingering villain in the background who's just poking at every decision that's being made and contradicting. So I think that's the upside. Oh, go ahead if you got a thought on that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, no, Trump not being on social media is a huge hit for him, because when you're the erstwhile leader of the free world, you got 88 million followers on Twitter, whatever million followers on Facebook, you have all that access. Everything you say is news. Right. Now, the only people he can talk to, he can only preach to the choir. He can only talk to the converted, because they're going to look for him. And everyone else is going to just move on. And we got to remember that this is a guy who lost the popular vote twice, who never had an approval rating over 50%, who didn't really become president because he was anything except a troll. And to think that he's going to have enduring power beyond the base of the party, I just don't see it. Yeah.
When you think about the last 4 years, I know there's a terrible amount of things that we could think of, and you can just, close your eyes and think of anything. But do you think that the positive thing, and this is something that I would read about, like what, like racism is people who in the South, it's like, it, like you can see it, you can feel it, it. But in the northern part of the country, it's hidden, so you don't know. But and has Trump kind of like took that took that veil away, and now we see how far racism and bigotry stretches across this country, and at least we can now see it and deal with it versus it being sort of hidden in the shadows. But like we know now, it's like a real problem.
Yeah, I think what we learned was that racism is an action and white supremacy is a belief system. Right. And so we saw the acts of racism in the past, and we thought that those were isolated incidents of ignorant people.
Right.
What we've actually seen through the Trump administration and through Trumpism in the past 4 years is that white supremacy is a belief system. And there is a lot of people who adhere to that belief system. There's a lot of people subscribing to that shit. And so, and it's not just slack-jawed yokels in Alabama missing a couple of teeth who don't like black people. It's upper middle class, wealthy white people who are in all kinds of positions of power around America. Think about it. Those people who attacked the Capitol, the images that you saw were they wanted you to see a bunch of rednecks, but in actuality, these were real estate agents, these were former military, these were professionals, these were people who, the suburban white folks.
There's Olympic athletes.
Yeah.
Government officials, the guy from West Virginia. Yeah, it was across the board.
And so we're now able to separate racism as an action, right? Racism as a verb from white supremacy as a belief system in animating ideology. And in doing that, we can at least have an honest conversation about what white supremacy looks like versus what racism looks like. Because the big argument you get from white folks is like, I'm not racist. I got a black friend, right? But now it's, but white supremacist ideology leads you to believe this, leads you to think that, leads you to subscribe to this, whatever's. And so now the conversation is a little bit more robust.
Right.
For those who want to get activated, that's great. But for those who still want to believe that, let me put it a different way. I was having a conversation over the summer with a friend of mine, and she was asking, what can I do? How can I help? And I was like, you got to go fix other white people because I can't.
So there's a white woman that you're talking to.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, you got to go fix other white. I can't fix white people.
Right.
I'm not in the room when somebody makes the joke and everybody laughs and only one or two people roll their eyes. Those people need to speak up.
Right.
I'm not there in the room when you all are trying to make a decision on hiring somebody and you say, or somebody says, I don't know about Daryl. He's not a good cultural fit. And you know what that's code for. But if you don't say anything, then that's white supremacy that gets to slide. Right? So you have to actively not just be anti-racist, but you have to actively look for and understand when white supremacy rears its ugly head, and you can't let that shit slide because I'm not in the room, right? I cannot fix white supremacy. That's just not going to happen just by virtue of my identity and my place in this world. I'm not going to be able to unracist anybody.
Yeah.
So it's really on white people now. Right? They've seen what this can turn into, and they have to decide whether or not they want to, fight against it, or they want to be complicit in it. And there's no middle ground.
Yeah. I mean, I think from the 75 million people that voted for him, they're complicit in what is occurring and wanted to continue despite all the opportunities to view Trump as being an inept, unqualified individual, and yet they still subscribe to 4 more years. I think that's scary to know that there's a large half of the country one is okay with what it was happening during the summer, and also what's happening, up to the Capitol, and wanted more of it. I think that's pretty crazy.
Well, but I also think that Donald Trump was a uniquely positioned individual in that we have been conditioned to accept Donald Trump's eccentricities for 40 years, right? Since the late 70s, since the 80s,
Right.
Donald Trump has been a pop culture fixture, and his celebrity has allowed him a certain degree of latitude that I don't think someone else, a traditional politician, would have got. Right? A traditional politician would never have been able to have run on five bankruptcies, 2 divorces, infidelity, just being all of the things that Donald Trump was. And I think not a lot. I think there's a good percentage of people who went in and at least the first time and maybe even the second time pulled the lever for Donald Trump, not because of any other reason than they thought he was the guy from The Apprentice. They thought he was the actual celebrity, the mythologized celebrity that he had been presenting himself as for the past 40 years. They thought that was who he actually was. And I think that you don't just undo that level of conditioning, right? And it's like, I was joking with my wife. I was like, I think the only other person who could probably pull that off was Chuck Norris.
Right, you're right. Probably.
Because, he's another person who we have a mythology around Chuck Norris. He's a badass, and if he ran for president, there would be a representative cohort of voters out there who wouldn't know anything else about Chuck Norris except he's a badass, so they're going to try to vote for him. And so, the other lesson here is celebrities don't make good politicians. And you can't vote for the myth because that's all image, that's all fugazi, that's all made up. And so, I think about the 75 million people that voted for him this time, and I'm pretty sure that 20 million of those people were low information who just went in and went, "That's the host of The Apprentice. I like him."
Yeah,
and that's how, and that was how they cast their ballot.
Yeah. What do you think as we move forward into the Biden administration? There's a lot. You were kind of mentioning there's a lot of questions we need to answer. One of them, obviously, is the impending impeachment that's going to be forthcoming, and if there's enough senators to convict, but also bar Trump from ever holding public office again. You surprised me and had the plot twist because I'd never thought about this and I never thought that it would be possible. But you were kind of predicting that maybe Republican senators just don't show up for work the day that they vote and leave it up to the Democrats to convict.
Yeah, it's 2/3 of the Senate who show up, not 2/3 of the full Senate, not 2/3 of a quorum. They got all you need is a quorum to do business, and then from there, it's 2/3. So if there's 50 Republican senators, and if 30 of them decide not to show up to work that day, and 5 of them decide to vote with the Democrats, Donald Trump is convicted.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to think about this from the perspective not of right or wrong, but think about this from the perspective of politics. And the perspective of politics is this: if you are Tom Cotton, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, or any other Republican senator that is thinking about running for president in 2024, you want Donald Trump out the way.
Right.
You don't want him to be able to run again. And so it's in your best interest to have him barred from running again. So what is the best politics here? The best politics is this, and this is, again, people, this is not going to please folks, but this is what the good politics looks like. The good politics looks like a minority of Republicans show up, a majority of Democrats do. They convict Donald Trump. On a majority vote, party line, 51 votes bars him from running for office again. Joe Biden vacates the conviction, but the punishment still stands. So Joe Biden pardons Donald Trump for his conviction, but allows the punishment to stand so he can't run anymore. He looks magnanimous. He looks like he's the rational actor in the situation. He loses. I mean, the progressive side are going to be upset with him. A lot of Democrats are going to be mad. Republicans will be mad. People will be mad. But that's not the point. The point is, you want to make Trump a non-factor. if he can walk around as an impeached and convicted martyr, he's a problem. But if he can walk around as an impeached but not exonerated, but pardoned
right
guy who no longer can run for office, what does he do? He can't tweet. He can't go on Facebook. He can't campaign. He can't do rallies. He's boxed in. And that's really the goal here. The political goal is just box him in, right? Not you're not going to neutralize him. You're not going to destroy him, but you can contain him. So that's the I think that's the good politics. You know,
a lot of people are the first 100 days. So his agenda and to pass a new stimulus to fight the virus. And so the Senate's going to have to balance their time between the trial and also doing their job of confirming and also getting bills passed through. How much of this is going to probably kind of like a new world where we actually see the Senate working all the time? Do you think in a weird way this kind of like brings together bipartisanship, or do you think that there's always just going to be that sharp division of like, you know what, screw it, we're not going to help out Biden, even if it is good policy, just follow the Obama playbook, the McConnell playbook on Obama, like regardless if it's good policy, we just object?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a honeymoon, and I think that, you know, the fact of the matter is everyone understands that the pandemic is out of control, and everyone understands that there needs to be some type of action taken towards solving that problem. So I think that anything that is couched in pandemic relief is going to get fast tracked. There are other priorities that need to be addressed that are going to become contentious. Things like voting rights, things like climate change, things like, an infrastructure bill overall to bail us out of, after this is over. But for the most part, it appears as though the Republicans at least understand that the Democrats can pass what they need to pass with or without them, right? With them, they can do it easily. Without them, it's a little bit tougher, but then they have to own the fact that they weren't trying to help. And This is a completely different position than it was in 2008. 2008, it was these people bought homes that they couldn't afford. Why should we bail them out?
Right.
In 2020, the pandemic was nobody's fault. Nobody who had a good job, working at a restaurant or had a good job, working somewhere in the service industry, those people didn't lose their jobs because they were incompetent. They didn't lose their jobs because they were bad people. They lost their jobs because the economy went belly up and the people couldn't leave their houses. Or people couldn't go to a movie theater. People couldn't go to a restaurant. People couldn't go to a bar. People couldn't go to a concert.
Right.
So that's where I think you have a bit, the leeway is different, right? The leverage is different in that in 2008, it was really about fuck Wall Street and these stupid people who bought these expensive houses. This time, there's really not a person or people to say, this is your fault. And so there's a little bit more room for altruism, a little bit more.
Yeah. Do you think that, we hear kind of like the Democrats, like they need to hold it together. Like as long as as long as they stay together with their 50 strong and then Kamala Harris being the 51st vote, like they can get through a lot. But there are some restrictions. There are some limitations to that. There are some certain bills or certain legislation that does require 60 votes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fill us in on what those are, if you know.
So, anything that contributes to the deficit, you probably need 60 votes.
So does that include the stimulus bill?
So then there's a thing called budget reconciliation.
How does that work for the dummies out there like myself?
So reconciliation is basically a backdoor into spending money that allows you to have 51 votes versus 60 votes, right? But it is a messy process because you're essentially attaching a budget bill to another bill that's not a budget bill to create something that looks like it's deficit neutral, but it's really not. All right, it's a shell game, right? It's just it's an accounting trick. So you can pass a lot of things through reconciliation. The problem is that voters will penalize. It's cheating, right? And so voters might penalize you for it. And Republicans, if it doesn't work, can say, well, we weren't on board with this, and they broke the rules to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So it comes with risk, right? The idea of having consensus is that everyone shares the risk, right? The problem between Democrats and Republicans is that Republicans are a homogenous political party, right? So Republicans can do and act in a uniform way because all they're going to say is no. Democrats are a diverse coalition of people who need a lot of different things. So if you have a caucus that spans from Bernie Sanders to Joe Manchin, you're going to have to do a level of negotiating internally that the caucus that spans from Mike Lee to Rand Paul just doesn't, right? When the outliers in the party are when Mitt Romney is the outlier, right?
All right.
You don't have to do the same kind of arm twisting. And so that's where it gets difficult for Democrats because you have your progressive wing who don't want to negotiate. They don't want to, they're looking at what Republicans have done and they're thinking, we want to do just like that. We want to be bullies just like that.
Strong arm, right?
Yeah. Why can't we just ram things through? You have a moderate wing who looks at that and goes, well, because we got to keep Joe Manchin, John Tester, and these two Georgia senators in office. So we can't just ram things through. And so that's where the it's just different. It's a different, same ball, different games.
Yeah.
And so that's where Democrats have to be patient because they can get 80% of what they want. It's just going to require them negotiating a hell of a whole lot more.
There's a lot of blowback from the news that Schumer and McConnell had discussed sharing sort of power in the Senate. The Democrats would control the schedule, but there would be a split on committee members. The Democrats don't have to do that, right?
They do.
They still do, even though they have that one vote majority.
The one vote majority is not an actual one vote majority. They have a tiebreaker majority. That's right. That's not a majority.
Yeah, it's like sort of unofficial. Yeah.
So if Democrats had 52 seats, then they would be able to have, the advantage of one extra seat. But the fact of the matter is, it's a 50-50 Senate. Because Democrats hold the tiebreaker, they're the majority, but they're really the majority in name only, right? And so, yeah, it's not a big deal. And people have taken the whole thing out of context and be like, oh my God, the Democrats are, no, it's 50-50, and if you have a sibling, if you grew up with you know what this is like. Right? You get to be older, so you get to have a little bit of an advantage. But if it's a candy bar and it's a Kit Kat, you get 3 and she gets 3, and that's how it goes. So it's the problem is that people on social media, Twitter does not allow you to get into nuance and detail. So they see Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, power sharing agreement, and that's like, oh, hell, why we got to do that? Well, if it was the other way around, and it was 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans, and Mike Pence was the tiebreaker vote, it would look just about the same. With the committees, the Republicans would be able to would manage the schedule, and they would have the gavels on the committees, but the committees would be 50-50, and the tie would go to the Republicans. In this case, committees are 50-50, and a tie goes to the Democrats. That's just it. It's a mountain being made out of a molehill.
The next 2 years, what does Biden need to do to continue to pick up more seats in the Senate and win back some in the House? Is it not so much the stimulus and the economy, but is it more important to get the virus under control, get the vaccine more available, and so that we can at least turn down the number of deaths? Like there has to be some sort of noticeable impact on the virus for people to go, oh shit, like yeah, like we noticed there's, because if obviously if we're able to get a handle on the virus either through the vaccine or through, I think he's looking at sort of a mandatory mask mandate on federal grounds, or at least when you're trafficking through states, something to that magnitude. But if we can see that those policies are having an impact on the economy where jobs are returning, like restaurant or food service or any sort of service jobs, would that sort of sway, I want to say Republican and conservative voices, but those who didn't vote for Biden, would that be able to sway them into believing more in the Democratic ticket in 2020, was it 2022?
So the virus is existential, right? The virus is the endemic problem. And so you can't fix anything unless you fix the virus. So even if you were to open up the economy tomorrow and you would say everything's open, people's fear of the virus is preventing them from shopping. It's preventing them from traveling. It's preventing them from going to concerts. It's preventing them from doing everything. So coming up with a plan to address the virus, to distribute the vaccine, to get people vaccinated, that is going to impact everything else. And the economy is going to bounce back, right? I mean, you have a whole bunch of people who have been sitting idle, who are saving money, right? Who they're not paying for gas, they're not paying for travel, they're not paying for all kinds of stuff. So they're just sitting on money. And once they feel as though it's safe to come out, they're going to spend. They're going to buy cars, they're going to buy clothes, they're going to go on trips, they're going to do stuff. What's coming and what's going to be kind of the game changer here, I think, is going to be, right now you only have 2 vaccines that require 2 shots. So you have the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine.
Right.
They're both 2-shot vaccines. What's going to get approved pretty quickly is going to be the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Those are 1 shot. While they're not as efficacious as Moderna and Pfizer, Moderna and Pfizer are about 90, 95%.
Sure.
Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca are about 70, 80%. If you can get those single shot vaccines into the arms of people who are in their 30s, 40s, and 20s, that's going to cause the virus amount to drop. It's going to cause the number of infections to go down. And as the number of infections go down, the amount of virus in the environment goes down, people will feel more comfortable going out. So over the next few weeks, once those vaccines get approved and you can come up with a mass, because right now Joe Biden wants to do 100 million vaccinations in 100 days, right? Well, 100 million shots in 100 million days, which actually comes out to 50 million vaccinations, because that's 2 shots.
2 shots, right.
Once you can get that 1-shot vaccine going, that gets you that brings that's speed, that's efficiency, right? Because now it's 1 shot, you wait 10 days and you can go back out, right? And so that's where I think, probably by the end of the summer, we're going to see things starting to bounce back. Things looking closer to normal than they do right now.
I know the answer to this, but I just want to hear you say it. Was that Trump's downfall, by not having a federal plan for the states and working with the states instead of having them, man and decide on their own, like what their plan is going to be? It's like not, because I imagine Biden is going to have a plan for every state and how to distribute and how many, who's getting what, how it's going to get sorted out. They'll be behind all that planning. But do you think if Trump would have just did just a minor amount of planning, or his administration he would have been in a lot better shape?
Yeah. this is where having the right people in the right place at the right time comes in handy, right? Jared Kushner can't be in charge of Middle East peace, the economy, and the response to the pandemic. You can't have people who don't know what they're doing trying to manage this process.
Yeah.
Look, if Donald Trump had come out on March 13th in the East Room of the White House with Mitch McConnell on one side and Nancy Pelosi on the other side and said, listen, shit's about to hit the fan. It's about to get real bad. We're gonna do lockdowns. We're gonna do some closures. We're gonna try to, mitigate this virus. Hey, and we're gonna send out checks every 3 weeks until we got this under control. I guarantee you wouldn't have had civil unrest over the summer. Those George Floyd protests wouldn't have happened because people would have been satisfied. They'd have been sitting at home collecting their government check and waiting until somebody told them it was safe to go out. All right. Because you don't give people that government check just to placate them. You give them that check to pay them to stay home. You give them a check to pay them to close their businesses, right? If they had done that, if they had just done the basics of responsible government, Donald Trump would have probably, I think he still had a pretty solid chance of losing, but it would have been far closer, and he would have probably had a 25-30% chance of winning.
Yeah.
Like that's just the long and short of it.
I agree. And I think that I agree with the idea about the civil unrest is that you had people who were unemployed, pissed off, upset, seeing a black man murdered on their TV once again, and they have nothing but time on their hands. And so imagine if it would have been Philandro Castro Castillo again, then it would have been like, oh shit, I got to get up for work tomorrow. But guess what? I don't have work. So I got time to be on the streets protesting and in people's faces. I have that energy right now. And you're right. If people would have been a little bit more comfortable staying home, a lot of what we saw, it's very probable that we might not have seen it escalate to where it went to.
No, the baseline of those protests was fuck Donald Trump. That was the baseline of those protests, right?
Yeah.
The popular feeling was, so first off, let's just take a step back and let's remember Donald Trump was not elected with a popular mandate. He was not elected by the majority of the people, right? But he governed like he was, and he only governed to 30%. He governed for his base. And so he had never done anything to really curry favor with people on the other side of the aisle. Right? He'd never thought about, how do I do anything except placate my base and then screw everybody else. So because he was in this position where he was not a popularly elected president, not necessarily popular with the people, and then he came out on the absolute wrong side of a civil unrest issue. Yeah, people were just like, fuck it, let's go to the streets.
Yep.
And the overall general theme of those protests was screw everything first, screw Donald Trump second, and then fuck the police third, right? And really the police were the avatar for everything that was wrong in society, right? You have an administration that trades in cruelty. It's defining feature. And then you have a police force that has meted out cruelty to an extent where they are killing people, right? Between Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks, Ahmaud Arbery, you have all these people who have been killed. And again, it goes back to that realization that racism is an action, white supremacy is a way of thinking. And so people took to the streets. And that's kind of how we got to where we are. And I think that you can draw a very bright red line between all of the people who were in the streets and all the people who stood in line to vote early. And that was, I think, that was the game changer.
Yeah. Well, once again, people had time to wait to vote, and everyone was just so energized and pissed off and on their fuck Trump crusade that they would wait in a 6-7 hour line and be okay with that.
Yeah.
Because they're just like, I can't do another 4 years like this.
No.
I'm curious to see if that energy is going to stay within the party and have people motivated, and that this wasn't like the achievement of like we did it, but it's like Kobe would say, job's not done. So what? How do and I hate to just throw this on Stacey Abrams' shoulders, but she's just been so great at organizing and getting the vote out. But how do the Stacey Abrams keep that momentum going, into the next 2 years to pick up more seats so that they have a super majority? I'm curious to see how that's going to work.
Well, I'm more curious to see what's going to happen. So I'm not betting on Democratic success as much as I'm betting on Republican failure, because the Republicans last week started a civil war within their own party, and they're going to be fighting that for the next 2 to 4 years at least,
right?
Probably 5 or 6, right? And they're going to have to decide: are they going to be the party of Trump, or are they going to be the Republican Party? Now, I believe that democracy can only work when you have at least two functioning parties that fundamentally believe that government should do something, right? Right now, the Republican Party of the Trumpist Republican Party is animated by inaction and atrophy. They don't want the government to do anything, and in fact, they want to destroy government.
Right.
That doesn't work in a democracy where the government has to actually perform certain tasks, right? So the Republicans have been so overzealous in terms of gutting the government that they gutted the IRS. So now, if you owe the IRS money, they can't come after you. I mean, they can, but it's not like they could come after you back in the 90s or the 80s where they had they had a full arsenal of weapons. The IRS is massively understaffed. The post office understaffed. The basic functions of government are understaffed, and that's by design by the Republicans. I believe that America deserves a rational conservative party. I think we need a rational conservative party.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, it's otherwise it just don't work, right? And had Joe Biden lost, the Republicans would have ceded all of their party to Trump. They would have become the Trump party. And the Democrats would be having a civil war right now between the progressives and the moderates, right? Because it would have been the Bernie would have won folks versus the why do we pick Joe Biden? He's just like him. There was another John Kerry folks versus the Elizabeth Warren. You would have factions. Right now, at least the Democrats are all in the same boat, right? And they've all agreed to row in one direction. But I think that Republicans are going to have more problems. Republican failure is going to be a bigger problem than Democratic success.
That's interesting.
So I think that the Democrats are going to do well enough to not fail. But I don't see how the Lincoln Project guys and Marjorie Taylor Greene and the QAnon people can ever coexist in the same party. Sure. And I also don't think that Trump will allow the Republican Party to live without him. I don't think that. I think that if he can't have the party, he will take his base and he'll start his own.
Right. He definitely has the people to do it.
Yeah.
All right. Before we let you go, Corey, any predictions for the next 4 years? You kind of like outlined one of them, the internal war within the Republican Party. Do we, in 4 years, have a more unified country or a more divided country?
We have a more divided country because we have a more diverse country in 4 years, right?
Yeah.
The electorate in 2024 is going to be less white. It's going to be more diverse. It's going to be younger. And so you're going to have more division just based on the fact that you're going to have a lot more identities that are going to want representation, and you're going to have an entrenched power structure that wants to maintain its power structure.
Yep.
So, I'm not a Pollyanna who thinks that Joe Biden is going to get up tomorrow, deliver the greatest speech ever. We're all going to come together and sing Kumbaya. I think that you have opportunities for. I think that Donald Trump was a disjunctive president. I think that it was a disjunctive administration, and I think that we've broken away now from the 40-year Reagan cycle. We're out of Reaganomics. We're out of Reaganite thinking. So now we have to reorganize our government and our governing philosophy to meet the moment, but also to meet the needs of the next generations, because the baby boomers are no longer going to be the power brokers, right? Millennials are going to be the largest voting cohort. Gen Zs are going to be coming in right behind them. And so that's going to shade the politics. And so I think that come 2024, there are a lot of different balls in the air. I am of the opinion that Joe Biden will run for re-election. I don't see how anybody runs for president and then voluntarily gives up being president for any reason other than, health. And barring some type of major health crisis, I don't see Joe Biden not running for re-election.
Which would make them 82 in 4 years, right?
Yeah.
So.
But okay.
Got it.
I don't see the Republicans regrouping in any rational way in the next 4 years to really mount a rational challenge. I also don't think they're going to be unified enough to mount a real challenge. Trump is always going to be in the shadows. He's just going to be there. And if they don't contain him in some way, he's going to be, he's going to influence, as long as he's alive, he's going to have part of the mortgage on the party.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that, I'll give you my three predictions.
All right, go ahead.
So one, I think that the Democrats will actually pick up seats in 2022. They will defy gravity, and they will win more seats in the House and more seats in the Senate in 2022. All right? That's one, because I can look at the map and I can see it. Two, I think that there is going to be, again, a major fracture and cleavage of some sort in the Republican Party that is going to cause them to split in some fundamental way between the conspiracy theory wing and the traditional conservative wing. And then three, I think that the next coalition that comes out of that will be reformed Republicans, reformed conservatives, and business-minded Democrats who will no longer look for small government, but they'll look for smart government. And so the next thing is no longer going to be about how can we privatize or how do we shrink government, but it's going to be how do we take the lessons from Silicon Valley and disrupt government? How do we take the lessons from all of these sectors that seem to be innovative, and how do we innovate government? And I think that that's going to be the next conservative, when I say conservative, small c, wave, because, I don't think that Bernie Sanders wing of I don't think the Bernie Sanders progressive movement and the Joe Manchin types can coexist for more than 2 election cycles.
Yeah. Does Texas go blue in 2024?
No, Texas goes blue in 2028.
When Kamala runs for her first, well, assuming.
See, I'm not sure. So Kamala Harris is going to have just an endemic advantage because she will be the sitting vice president. But my money's on Gavin Newsom. Because look, America California does it, and then America does it, right?
Yeah, everyone follows California.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan, was governor of California, and then he became president. California elected a unqualified celebrity governor. And then we elected an unqualified celebrity president. California has always set the trend. And I think that Gavin Newsom is, I think that the battle between Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom is, look, they're both Californians. All right. And so whatever the next thing that's going to happen in American politics is going to come from the West Coast.
Interesting. Well, that's 8 years from now. So we're outside our 4-year projection, but either way. Man, Corey, man, thank you for joining me to have this really great conversation about government. I think it's fascinating. It's interesting. It involves all our lives. And Corey didn't even wait for me to give him a shout out. But either way, shout out to Corey. There he is. He's back. I'm like, he didn't even hang on for me to just give him his props.
You froze up on me, bro.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I am on a really low bar for this internet, so that's funny that it waits to the end. But I think it's thank you for joining us, man, because it's really informative. It's interesting. Your insight is invaluable, and it's a really good discussion we had tonight. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it too, and hopefully next time I can talk about music and not talk about politics.
Listen, man, we could do whatever, man. I'm trying to explore conversations that aren't being discussed on this show. But I thought because we're right on the eve of a new president that you were the best candidate to join. But listen, you let me know what you want to discuss. 25-year anniversaries, 20-year anniversaries, whatever you want to do.
Okay. All right, because I think we're coming up on 25 years of Stakes is High this year.
Is that, well, yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, 96. 96, right? Is 25 years. That's a good year too. It was written, gonna have to talk about that.
Oh God, what, ATLians?
ATLians, yep.
Philadelphia.
Reasonable Doubt is
Doubt. At the Speed of Light.
Oh, you're an Exhibit fan. Okay. Yeah. All right, I see you. All right.
We can so.
Well, we're gonna have to get a joint panel to go through all the albums of '96. I think that would be the best thing to do. So we could definitely put that in motion. So we'll talk more about that and get more voices and faces. So we have a grand conversation about that. I think that's the move. We'll have to probably make it 3 hours though. I don't know. You have to buckle in. It's gonna turn into a Drink Champs episode.
Old dudes talking about hip hop. That could be a channel on cable.
Exactly. I mean, maybe one day we get someone to pick us up and throw us on one of those close. What is it? What are those channels on cable access channels?
Yeah.
That's what we need. Yeah.
I'm down.
All right, Corey, man. Enjoy your inauguration tomorrow. I'm sure we'll be following your Twitter. Please tell people where they can follow you on these tweets.
I'm at Vexed in the City on Twitter.com.
There you go. It's a great follow. I highly recommend that. All right, man. Enjoy the rest of your night. We'll talk soon. All right.
You too, man.
All right, Corey Richardson joining us here on Weekend at Gabe's. That's going to be our time. Don't forget to give us a follow on the internets at Weekend Gabe on all social media platforms. And give us a follow and a subscribe here on Twitter as well. On Twitch, excuse me. And we'll do it again on Friday night. We're still booking guests, so we'll have something really exciting. Maybe we'll just have Corey back to talk about hip-hop in 96 for 3 hours. I don't know. Maybe we can do that. All right, enjoy the rest of your evening, fellas and women. Have a good